Who's ready to boldly go to the movies? Hi, I'm Joe, and today I'm going to show you some of my Star Trek brick-built models that are ships that are exclusive to the movie versions of the franchise. Of course, Star Trek started with a TV show in the 1960s, and then with the success of Star Wars in 1977, Star Trek was able to produce the movie, the Star Trek the Motion Picture in 1979, which had some moderate success, enough that Star Trek The Next Generation, another TV show, was produced, and eventually Star Trek has gone between TV shows and movies ever since. As part of the movies, Star Trek has introduced ships that are only seen in those films, and I've got 3 sets to show you today of those ships. We'll start here with a Blue Bricks model of a midi-scale Enterprise A. And while this is technically labeled the Enterprise A, which would officially be the Enterprise that was introduced at the end of Star Trek IV and used in Star Treks 5 and 6. Here you see the printed tile shows that this is specifically for Star Trek V, which was the first movie to actually use this ship on a mission. But in reality, this is just the refitted Enterprise that was used for the movies. So to illustrate the difference between what was actually used in the TV show, I'm going to use my Advent calendar models here, this being the TV Enterprise, and some of the more defining features that were changed for movies were the nacelles and the deflector dish. Here the nacelles are represented as cylinders with kind of these orange dome caps on the end, and the deflector dish looked more like a regular satellite dish you might see. And the movie Enterprise, or the refitted Enterprise, which is really the same as the Enterprise A, has the longer, flatter, more rectangular shaped nacelles, and also a concave blue deflector dish, where here let's look at the Blue Bricks model that has the translucent blue deflector dish here. And the nacelles here are formed by just a single brick wide set of bricks and these cheese grater pieces to give it that shape for the front. And we've got some printed pieces here on the back to identify this as the NCC-1701-A. And just for more color, we've got these black bricks on the outsides, and on the insides we've got these translucent blue grill pieces. And on the top we have the only printed pieces other than what we saw in the nacelles here on the front of the saucer section, which is only 1 brick thick. And that's 1 sideways brick thick, so that's only 2.5 plates. And there's no printing on the underside. And just for the view from the back, we don't really have a great representation of the shuttle bay, but we do have the impulse engines up here. So at this scale, this model's pretty decent. I wish they had made a UCS scale model for this ship, but I'm glad I have this. Next, we have the USS Enterprise E, which was debuted in the movie Star Trek First Contact, which was the second movie to feature the cast of Star Trek The Next Generation. You can see we've got the printed tile here, identifying this as the NCC-1701-E. And this is a ship I really don't have much attachment to because we don't really see it that much. It only appears in 3 movies: Star Trek First Contact, Star Trek Insurrection, and Star Trek Nemesis. And I don't have a great memory of what its defining features are, but when we look at this picture, one of the most notable things is probably the nacelles, which almost look like they're triangular in front, and they have the blue coloring on the top. And one of the other more noticeable things is while the Enterprise D had a saucer section that was more like a sideways oval, the Enterprise E definitely is much more elongated, almost more like Voyager. Or the way I like to compare the two is the Enterprise D is Ernie and the Enterprise E is Bert, with the longer top section. But the scale of this model is hard to describe because it's not MIDI scale, but it's bigger than micro scale. But I'd say it's definitely in scale with the Bricking News Signature Edition Klingon Bird of Prey, which we reviewed last summer. But on this model, we've got the nacelles just represented by plates with translucent blue plates on top for the color and little red 1x1 plates here at the front, and the saucer is very basic. I mean, this is just gray and dark gray pieces. And our deflector dish is a single 1x1 yellow stud. That's another defining feature of the Enterprise E, is it's got the yellow colored deflector dish, which is something I didn't realize until I was building the Advent calendar model, and it had this yellow 1x1 stud, although it's supposed to represent the dish while sitting sideways. But apparently that's something that the Bluebricks people were well aware of. And just like the Enterprise A, the stand is built up to look like a Federation logo, which is actually in line with what the comm badges looked like when Star Trek First Contact was released. Finally, we have here a Creo set of the USS Enterprise, and this is supposed to be the Enterprise from the Kelvin timeline. And one of the first things you might notice about this Enterprise is it has no stand. It just sits directly on the table. And I believe that's because this model was designed much more for play than for display, as it is definitely oversized in spots. If you look at it straight on, the nacelles look comically large compared to the saucer section, but we'll take a look at it. This was definitely a different kind of build, as it involves lots more large pieces. The main secondary hull and the support for the nacelles is just a single piece, and all you have to do to it is turn the supports 90 degrees so they have a place for the nacelles to go. And a lot of the saucer section is also just a single piece or very large pieces. You start off by building the saucer section, which builds around that large gray piece and involves a lot of pressing plates with lots of anti-studs onto plates with lots of studs, and that's what results in things like this, where no matter what I do, I cannot make those plates go together. I mean, I can push them down and then they'll just pop right back up. So that's frustrating as a building model, but it does stay on just well enough to keep everything together. And then you cap off the saucer with this whole assembly here is only about 10 pieces, with 4 of them being these tiles and 2 of them being this piece here on the top. And then you build up the nacelles, which is actually about the only part of the model that you actually build up quite a bit. And the nacelles, just to show what it looks like compared to what was shown in the movie Star Trek from 2009, which is what we call the Kelvin timeline, or what my wife calls the Chris Pine movies. You've got this bulgier section here in the front of the nacelles that we don't see in any other form of Star Trek. And that's represented here in the brick-built form. And we look at it from underneath. We do not have any printing underneath, nor do we have any tiling off. It's just exposed anti-studs. We do have a deflector dish here. And this leads to some of the play features, where there are batteries that you put in this bottom section here. This is actually a battery case, and it takes 3 AAA batteries. And one of the main play features of the model is it has lights. And there's a button here, this blue button here on the bottom of the secondary hull, that you use to activate the lights. Here, I'll turn the lights down to demonstrate. If I press it once, you see it flicker on, both in the nacelles and in the deflector dish. And it only stays on for a few seconds. And it offers different effects depending on how many times you press the button underneath. And essentially it's just whether the lights stay on or whether they flicker, but they turn themselves off after a few seconds. And one of the things that makes this model very unique is you can actually take the top of the saucer off, and there actually is an interior to the ship. This is the only Star Trek set that I own where the ship actually has an interior that's designed for placing minifigures. And the main view screen is here, which is just some tiles with a sticker across multiple tiles, and all that sticker shows is space. And it's folded down so you can close the saucer, but it's meant to be lifted up so that the rest of the crew can see it. And you've got seats for your helmsman and navigator, for the captain, And I guess that's 2 science stations there in the back. And we've also got some other screens here. Those again are stickers. And while there's not a whole lot of detail to the interior, you do have room to put your minifigures, and you could pretend that they are conducting operations on the bridge. And finally, one last feature I almost forgot to mention is it does actually have a firing mechanism where we've got a photon torpedo and a little lever onto the side where you press it and it shoots a torpedo. And that goes into yet another reason why I think this is a model made for play, is it comes with actually 4 of those missiles, even though we can only shoot 1 at a time. But when I got this Creo model, it wasn't just the Enterprise. It actually came with a second ship, a Klingon D7 battlecruiser. Now, I found this inclusion very interesting because the Klingons do not really factor in much into the Kelvin timeline or Chris Pine movies, and I don't remember ever seeing a Klingon D7 battlecruiser, but it is a welcome inclusion as it's actually a pretty decent little build. The D7 was the first Klingon ship really shown in Star Trek the Original Series, which is characterized by this front here that has the head, I don't even know how to describe that shape, where it's slanted down the sides and round in the front and kind of like has a bulb on the bottom. The back is more like wings that are angled somewhat downward, even though in this model they're pretty flat. This is a fairly decent model. And while it doesn't have the sophisticated lighting functions of the Enterprise model, it does have a light brick that is really hard to see, but it's supposed to simulate a laser shooting through the trans-red clear portion of this bubble section. Here, if I take that off, which honestly it's hard to keep it from falling off, you can see the light brick in there. As for the rest of the model, these decorations here on the wings, those are all stickers. They're actually clear stickers. And same with here. We've also got some more weapons here on the sides where it shoots these little, I don't even know what you call that piece, but you just press that and, well, it's not a very powerful weapon. And then finally, just like the Enterprise, there's actually an interior here. And I'm going to go ahead and just take this all the way off, and we have seats for 3 members of the crew. And finally, just like the Enterprise, there's no stand here for the Klingon D7, which is really weird because it actually came with feet, like landing gear, but the feet are higher up than the sides of the wings or the front of the ship. So when it's laying flat, it reminds me of the way like a dog might lay flat with its face on the ground. And since we do have space in these models for minifigures, we do actually get minifigures with them. We'll start with the Federation crew, which starts here with, on the far left, this is supposed to be Captain Kirk. Why they chose to put him in an all-gray uniform for a playset, I have no idea. But these minifigures are, the hair is kind of rubbery on all of them, but the regular body is pretty similar to the Blue Bricks figures where they can twist around like that, and the legs are on joints that allow them to have some separation if you want to show a more of an action pose like he's running. One thing that I found, though, it was hard to put these on the plate here because the anti-studs on the bottom of the feet are actually circles instead of squares. And we see he's holding a very shiny phaser. Next we have Spock, similar body. The main difference, of course, being his facial expression and his ears, where the ears are actually molded onto the hairpiece. He also has the shiny phaser. Then we have Dr. McCoy, who, instead of a phaser, gets what looks like some type of medical tricorder. And again, with the gray uniform, I'm not sure. But Sulu here, he actually gets the proper gold Starfleet uniform and the shiny phaser. And then finally, our other bridge officer, Chekhov, who has the same body as Sulu and the same phaser. And since our Klingon ship has 3 seats in it, we get 3 Klingon figures. And these are all pretty generic. I'm pretty sure that's the same headpiece for all of them. That is not a helmet on top of a head. That is a single molded rubber piece here. And The helmets have ridges on them, but we have no idea whether the Klingons do, and I'm guessing this is how the Kelvin timeline / Chris Pine movies got around the issue of whether or not the Klingons have ridges on their foreheads at that point in the timeline. But two of our Klingons here are pretty much identical. They have the same torso print, and they have the same weapon, which looks like they're holding some type of blaster or super soaker or whatever upside down, but that's the way the instructions say they're supposed to hold it. While our third Klingon here has a little bit different chest printing and is holding a bat'leth, which to my knowledge, this is the only bat'leth I've ever seen. It looks like it was made to be held by a minifigure. So that's it for those three sets, but I do still have one more movie exclusive set, except it doesn't involve a ship. It just involves minifigures. It just involves minifigures. This was one of the Blue Bricks minifigure packs that they had introduced very briefly in the summer of 2024 that were quickly pulled from their shelves. But Blue Bricks recently made this one available again as part of a bundle. And this is a movie exclusive minifigure pack because you can see on the tile here, it says it's for Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. And while there are Klingon specific prints on the figures, there is no Klingon specific mold. I believe the hair mold here is all the same, and all the ridge detail is printed and not molded. Same with the facial features, where they do have noses, but there's no ridges or anything molded into the face. But here we have Captain Krug, who was known from the movie as being the scientist who built the time machine, who was known from the movie as being the Klingon commander who acquired Genesis information and wanted to go to the planet and find the scientists who knew how to turn it into a weapon for him. And eventually, he and Kirk face off, both in a space battle and in hand-to-hand combat on the planet. Captain Krug is identifiable mostly by the Fu Manchu. And here we have Torg, who is identifiable for not having a beard and is best known for leading the Klingon boarding party that comes to the Enterprise bridge and doesn't recognize what a countdown sounds like just before the Enterprise explodes. And then finally we have Maltz, who was a Klingon officer who was left on the ship while Krug was down on the planet, and who beams all the Enterprise crew up without realizing that Kirk has defeated the captain, where Kirk says, "Help us or die," and then Maltz says, "I do not deserve to live," and Kirk says he'll kill him later, and as far as I know, we're still waiting on that. Fun fact, Maltz was played by John Larroquette, who became much more famous for playing prosecuting attorney Dan Fielding on the sitcom Night Court. But we don't just get a Klingon crew here. We also get a movie version of Captain Kirk, where I'm not so sure about that hairpiece, but I also wasn't sure about that hairstyle that William Shatner was sporting in 1984. And the chest print, I think, accurately reflects the shirt he was wearing in Star Trek III when he was battling the Klingons, which coincidentally he also wore throughout most of Star Trek IV. And there's even a spot for him on the display, although he does belong in this set of figures. It is odd to have him displayed with them, especially on top like that, as though he's like the dad of their family. No, he actually had two of them killed, and the other one he's promised to kill later. As for the stand itself, it's really just got places to pose the minifigures, but it's got a Klingon captain chair here that is supposed to swivel, but it's really stiff, but it does. And we've got this printed plate with the Klingon logo here, and a list of who the figures are. And I guess if you wanted to not display Kirk with your stand, but you wanted to have him around, there's actually a little spot in the back that is designed for you to put him when he's not on display in the front. And he can just stand there, I guess, waiting to take over the ship. Thank you for taking this trek to the movies with me today, and I hope you'll always remember that today is a good day to build.